Feedback on here. I think we should use this one.
Is the other one on?
No.
No? That's-
There we go. All right.
How's that?
Yeah.
I always enjoy coming to these conventions because it gives me a chance to talk about my favorite subject, which is the tech and the philosophy of Scientology. And I just found over the years that nothing gives me more pleasure than seeing people win with the tech, whether it was me applying it, whether it was them applying it to themselves, or just reading the material, or being on course and having realizations. And I just think that's such a great thing. The tech that LRH developed, the whole purpose of it was to figure out how did things get to where they are, and whether that applies to an individual or a group or society itself. How do things get to where they are? Because once you've answered that question, then you can develop processes to reverse engineering it. And that's really what you're doing. You're reverse engineering the cycle of action that evolved into whatever the current situation is. LRH says that the only reason to train people, the only reason they have orgs, the only reason they have dissemination is so that somebody could sit down with an auditor and get auditing. So the central idea of everything that LRH ever did was so that actually people could sit down and get auditing. And it's important to look at what are you really doing when you're auditing somebody. And another interesting point about LRH too, because all the people that had upsets with Hubbard and upsets with the church and so on, and they always would point to, he had such a temper and he got mad at people and things like that. And I was thinking about that one time, and I was thinking, well, what's the other side of that? Who did he never get mad at? And he never got mad at a PC, and he never got mad at a student. And in fact, he would get mad at people who got mad at PCs. And people that he thought were doing things that were counterproductive to PCs getting good auditing and students getting good training. That's who he got mad at. And you can tell a lot about a person's goals by who they get mad at, because they get mad at people that are in direct opposition to their goals. So if you take a look at those two factors, you get an idea of what LRH's true goals were, so that he could develop technology, people could benefit from the technology, and improve conditions. Scientologist is a person who applies the tech and improves conditions. And really it's as simple as that. I mean, the tech isn't truth, it's a way of accomplishing truth, or a way of uncovering truth. And it's interesting about truth because he says, like, all truth is relative truth, except for ultimate truth, which has no time, place, form, or event. And you see this in auditing too. I know one of the first things that my auditor, when I first got into Scientology, talked about, was, well, you're auditing this guy, and one day he cognites that his ass is green, and the next day he cognites that his ass is red, He says, but it doesn't really matter because he's cogniting towards basic truth. And I think that's right, because all truths are relative truths, and truths have different applications. There's what's true about your track, what's true about somebody else's track, what's true about the physical universe. And ultimately, at some point along the way, you hit some big basic truth, and that leaves you pretty speechless. If you ever had that experience in session where you just kind of like, like that. And, yeah, exactly. And there's no thinking involved. And there's just an awareness and a present time. It's like, we'll cycle back into present time. You know, one of those basic truths is it's all happening now. You know, there's no such thing as the past, there's no such thing as the future. It just all exists in mock-ups. It exists in different people's universes, and everybody's future, everybody's past is different. So once you get into, you realize in the present time, you realize what's all being mocked up now, you know? And that's a pretty amazing awareness to have, you know? Well, when you're auditing somebody, what you're doing is you're gaining control. You're helping the person gain control of their own universe and all the factors in their universe. And it's important to realize what are the only things that a Thetan can do. Now, this here. Well, so, Thetan can outflow. You can perceive something that exists out there, which is an inflow. You can postulate, you can perceive. You can form ideas about it. You can reach, you can withdraw. You can create, you can perceive. You can form ideas. So what are things Thetan can do? You can outflow, you can inflow, you can create ideas. It's the only thing you can do.
What about uncreating? Uncreate.
What?
What about uncreate? Create and uncreate?
Well, it's still kind of a creating. But, to really understand auditing and what you're doing, each particular process that you can run on somebody, you can look at how does that affect a person's ability to sort out or increase or get control over the abilities connected with outflowing, inflowing, and creating ideas or creating or uncreating, as you're saying. One of the important stable datums that LRH mentions along the way is when you're auditing somebody, you're not getting them to think, you're getting them to look. That's such an important distinction because when you look, you create space. One of the things that's happened with the person in terms of their own universe is their space has gotten smaller and more condensed and collapsed. So therefore things are hidden around and behind other things and become not visible to the person. So when you're looking at something, you're creating some space. The more you look, the more space you have. So the more space you have, the more you're able to perceive what's there. And the more things that, were tied together start to open up and when you get more and more auditing, you're able to see, you just spot something because it's there by itself and you're looking at it. It's not combined with a bunch of other stuff. And that's when you're able to start, blowing by inspection. You just spot a piece of mass or piece of charge and you blow by inspection. That's a very high level ability, but that's what you're working towards when you're trying to audit somebody. Now, in the way the mind works is that the Thetan has created an idea and put it there, and that's a stable datum, and that idea is a decision or a stable datum, and that decision is on automatic. It kind of like it's a default position in the person's mind. So to that degree, it's an idea that the person is somewhat lost control over their ability to start, change, and stop that idea because they've sort of decided on it, and there it is. Surfacts are like that, fixed ideas. They're, it's like whenever anything happens, a person thinks to themselves, oh yeah, they're all stupid. Well, it's a pretty good surf fact, it sort of explains everything. While actually explaining nothing. So, The purpose of the mind is to solve problems relating to survival. And it's based on the attempt of the mind, or the attempt of the being, is to come to a certainty of observation, because obviously if you can observe accurately the environment, you can know how to interact with it in a successful way. So the way these stable datums can work against that, the way that the mind can work against that, is like you've decided one thing over here, and that's important. So you're looking at something, but it doesn't, really, you're not really sure. So you pull this certainty out of the mind and you attach it to this thing you're looking at. And when it gets even worse is when you've decided this thing over here, this is really a basic truth for you, but then you've also at another time has decided this thing over here that is also a basic truth for you, which is an opposite idea. And that's where you get into these dichotomy of thought. Now, like an example of that is like, it comes from moral codes and different groups that you were part of, and you're like, you can't trust anybody. That's like a stable datum some people have. Or, you shouldn't really extend trust to anybody, is another stable datum that you have. Or more personal, a person has decided they can do something, or they decide they can't do something. So they have this I can and I can't stable datums in their mind. So when they look at a situation, it activates both of these poles, and then they get stuck in the maybe. What is that? They go, well, maybe I can. No, I don't think I can. Maybe I don't think I can. Oh, well, no, maybe I can. So they go, you see when people go back and forth, they toggle back and forth between these two edges of the maybes. What they're really being pulled by are these two poles on both sides of the equation. And when you're not sure what you're looking at, you're going to fill in a certainty out of the mind. And that certainty is going to distort the actual reality of what you're looking at. Or you're looking at something and then the mind tries to pull you off in a little bit of a different direction. So one of the reasons why I do certainty processing on people, because what you're doing is you're enabling the person to get control over these different stable datums, and it enables you to be certain about what you're looking at and not just to fill in things out of the mind based on uncertainties of observation. Also relates to valences and identities, because each of these I can and I can't, each of those things are valence. They're a whole package of be, do, have. So again, it's one of these things where you're trying to get the person in control over these areas of your mind. And how do you do that? With certainty processing. One of the definitions of a valence, it's that identity that's more certain about things than you are. So you'll go into that viewpoint, whether it applies or not. And to that degree, people look at you and they kind of think, oh, he's kind of out of balance, well, that's what you're looking at there, that kind of thing. See, valences are also part of GPM, so when you loosen up these poles, these dichotomies, you're loosening up the charge on GPMs as well. And the certainty processing is based off of the chapter in 8808 called certainty processing. And at the time it was, when it was developed, it was part of creative processing, which was audited by having people mock up this and mock up that and have them discharge against each other. And then right after that, Ellery says, well, we're not going to we're not going to do creative processing anymore because people tend to get massy doing it that way. And so therefore, probably for 60 years, nobody ever ran certainty processing. Now, a couple of years ago, I started auditing original OT7 on people, and there's a certainty process in there. This is just run, get the idea of X and then get the idea of Y. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. That's just a way of running certainty processing without involving, creative processing. And then and then I also realized in the assist book, there's a process called something and nothing. And I get the idea there is something here, there is nothing here. It's one of the assist processes. It works great. And I saw that that was part of certainty processing too. So I went back and I read it, and I realized you could run the whole subject on the subject. You could run the whole chapter based on just running it that way. So I started to do that, and I found it ran really well on people, even brand new people who you just came in off the street. They could run it because it's very simple to run. Yeah. So what you're doing really is you're having person. LRA says that to take control of any automaticity, you have the person consciously do it. Like if the person's pulling a mustache all the time, you have the person deliberately do it, not do it, deliberately do it. And eventually they get control over that machine. So if you have a person get the idea, I can do it, and then they get the idea, I can't do it, you get the idea, I can do it, get the idea, I can't do it, they're deliberately and consciously taking on these viewpoints, and therefore taking over the mechanism of having them key in automatically. So what's the net result of that? Well, the net result of that is the person just is exterior to those two viewpoints, can see things the way they are. I mean, it is what it is, maybe I can, maybe I can't, well, at least I can try, Also, by the way, one of the things that's very helpful if you find yourself in life going, oh, I can't do that, or somebody else says, oh, no, I can't do that. Just have them say, okay, well, change that a little bit to maybe I could do that. You see, that loosens it up. And, you can do that in yourself, and you find that you can loosen up your own stuck points in your own mind. So it gives you flexibility of thought and the ability to observe and just see what you see. Certainty is also confidence. You have confidence so you can see things the way they are, see things from your own viewpoint. So this is when I was going to audit Reza, this is what I decided to run on him. He's a very high-level being, and I thought he could really run this well, and it's also very versatile, because you can literally run it on any subject. The person says, oh, my mother or whatever. Well, you just plug in mother to some of these brackets, some of these dichotomies, and you can run off a lot of charge on that. And it's also very exteriorizing. Now, when Liz, the producer, first talked to me about doing this TV show, he says, oh yeah, we would, a resident wants to get some auditing. I said, well, I don't really want to audit somebody just to see if it works, He said, oh, no, he's been studying it. We've been studying, we spent a lot of time studying Scientology, trying to really understand it so we know what we're talking about. And he's got some things he wants to audit that he thinks he could get some benefits out of, I go, okay, well, I think I could do that, but I don't want to film it, He says, oh yeah, we want to film it. Well, I said, well, no, let me think about that. So anyway, the day of the filming, they show up, and all of a sudden there's this big, there's this big camera right behind my head, And then over on the other side of this small room, there's another camera. And then outside my window, there's a big Klieg light, like shining inside, And the producer says, okay, now here's what we're going to do. He says, because I've never met him. And he says, he's going to come to the front door. You're going to answer the front door. You're going to shake hands, say hi. And, then you're going to take him into session. Well, there's 100 ways this could go wrong. So Anyway. So I just took a deep breath and sat him down and asked him what he was interested in auditing, and he told me a couple of things, areas of charge, and saw the reason and so on. And I decided there was one other process I was going to run on him. It was called first postulate from the ARC Straightwire. And so I cleared the process and I ran it on him. The process is what isn't looking at you. And it's a kind of a, it is kind of, he said later he thought it was kind of a Zen moment for him, because he was like, it was really interesting because he kind of like, he looked and he was kind of like confused, and then he kind of like gave me some answers, and TA was going up, and all of a sudden, TA came down, and nice and he said, wow, that was like a Zen moment, and got me to think a little bit about Zen, what Zen is, because I had an experience one time where I was thinking about this, what is the sound of one hand clapping, which is, what people always think about when they think about Zen, what is that? He says, well, let me see if I can answer that question. So I was trying to create this representation of it, and all of a sudden I had this big cognition. It's like, well, I'm trying to represent something that can't be represented. And I realized that, that is the Zen moment, is you realize that as a Thetan, you cannot be represented by something at all, anything. So when you try to represent yourself as a being, you're creating something that you're identifying with. This is where, beingness and identity get mixed up. Once you realize you can't do that, I mean, for me, it's just everything went, and I realized what Zen was. It was like getting you to realize that you were you, and you were looking at everything else that was there, but nothing in the physical universe represents you, or it can be a substitute for you. When you try to do that, of course, then you become part of the physical universe. But anyway, that was just, it was interesting that he related it to Zen. I said yesterday there was an interview that he gave to this blog called Vulture on March 3rd of this year, which was quite a while after the session I gave on him. And I'll read you this. It's not that long, but it's very interesting what his take was. And just to let you know, one of the things he says in here, he says it went on for hours. Actually, it was an hour and 8 minutes was the session, but it just shows the subjective nature of auditing, where you can be in session for 20 minutes, it seems like an hour, or you can be in session for 2 or 3 hours, and it seems like 20 or 30 minutes. Anyway, the interviewer asked him, he says, well, with Scientology particularly, you take a much more sympathetic view than we typically see. I had no idea there's a reform movement going on in Scientology, and Reza says, I don't think the church knows that either. That's one that's going to probably blow people's minds the most. Not just because they're going to recognize that when you get down to it, Scientology beliefs aren't as weird as we think they are, but at the same time, to think that, there's this whole other thing happening where these Scientologists have left the church, but not that religion, and the parallels it has with Christian Reformation, or the Reformation of almost any religion, are really stark. There's already been a great deal of backlash before the episode from the anti-Scientology crowd, who are angry that we would even treat it like a legitimate faith expression. And then there's been a little bit of concern for the church, having just seen the previews. They were going to get another one of those shows that are about controversies and the scandals, and it's clear in the episode, and then the interview says, it's clear in the episode that you try to talk to the church. He says, I tried very hard, very hard. I get it, because it's a religion that's been demonized by the media and the public perception. A lot of it is their own doing. I don't think they're very good at dealing with criticism. And it would behoove them to learn how to do better. But as a member of one religious community that is constantly demonized, he's Muslim, I can't help but feeling a certain connection with them. But anyway, he says, then the interview says, you get auditing in that episode, which you note is the first time an auditing session has ever been filmed for mainstream American TV. What was that experience like? It looked a lot like therapy. And Reza says, I went into it thinking to myself, oh my God, I have to bare my soul. And it wasn't that at all. It was basically a mental exercise. I refer to it in the show as aversion therapy, where there's this thing that's bothering you, so let's just focus on that thing over and over again. And we clearly had to fast forward the auditing sessions, but that went on for hours. See, so it went on for hours. And the interviewer says, whoa, that sounds exhausting. He says, well, it was exhausting, but I will say there was something about it where when it was over, you couldn't help but feeling lighter. You couldn't help but feeling as though a certain weight had been removed from you. And I get it. I understand why people would undergo that experience like that, think to themselves, this is something I want to do over and over again.
Wow.
So, that's why I picked that process to run on, because it's a grading of getting control over elements and aspects of your own universe. Pictures are the same thing. You know, when you're running Dianetics, what are you really doing? You know, you're getting control over pictures that are kind of there on their own. They have a life of their own. But what's the difference with, you know, when you're auditing an incident, it converts from a reactive picture to an analytical picture. And sometimes people can't tell what's the difference there, because it's still pictures, you know. But reactive picture is kind of like, it's there, you know, it's posted there, you put it there, you know, you look at it, you look away from it, try not to think about it, you look back, it's still there. It has a life, it has an energy of its own, it has a life of its own. Now if I asked you to remember something earlier today, immediately remember something, and then we go on and talk about something else, it's not there anymore. So you can call up that picture, or you can not have that picture. You have control over that part of your mind. This is a picture you don't have full control over, so it's part of your reactive mind, it's part of the mind you don't have control over. So when you get full control over all of the pictures in your mind, all of the stable datums in your mind, then you're clear, because that's what clear is. So bit by bit, with every process, you're reclaiming your ability to control your own universe and to start, change, and stop anything in your own universe. Yeah, one of the big things you're working towards is well, when you really, on the way to OT, you know, you get to a point where you don't have to, there's no compulsion to defend or attack. You know, the GPM bank is basically buttons get pushed and the necessity to attack occurs. And, you know, that's why there's war, that's why there's conflict. It's the GPM buttons, you know. But the more you clear that out, the less compulsion you have to attack or defend. And another interesting point, you know, Elrace mentions this. I was auditing one of my PCs who was just really manifesting tremendous OT abilities, and he says, you know, I remember what Elrace says, you know, when you really get to be more OT, you're not impressed with winning or losing. and she kind of elaborated on that. She says, you know, when I see my postulate works, I just observe that my postulate worked. And if it didn't work, then I figure out why it didn't work, and I do it. You know, she says, I'm not impressed with myself because my postulate worked. And I'm not mad because it didn't. You just use it. See, when you get to the top of the scale, well, yeah, so you've got these elements of the mind, right? And then there's the time, place, form, and event of all these things. But then there's identity. Now the L's deal with identity quite a lot, but you have to understand what you're going towards. You know, at the top of the scale is Elrace calls it identityless, and that just means seeing you to identity. And these little mind traps that people, who am I? I have to find out who I am. I have to find out who I really am, Well, they're asking the wrong question, because they're really asking the question is, what identity do I have? Have I always had this identity? Is this the right identity for me? Well, they don't really ask that question because they're trying to ask a question about themselves and not that identity. So therefore, they've got this little A equals A going on between themselves and the identity. But, even on the ethics conditions, find out who you really are. See, the word who can mean identity, but really what it means in that condition is the other meaning of the word who is which being. Which being are you? Because if there's a crowd of people there and somebody throws something at you, you say, who threw that? Well, you don't mean what identity, you mean out of all those people, which one threw it, So out of all of the beings that exist, which one are you? You can answer that question. That's a pretty easy question to answer. That puts you exterior to identity. And you get to that point, and it's also one of the big differences between Scientology and other therapies is that it says you're trying to improve a being by deleting things from him and not adding things to him. So you delete this, you delete that, you get rid of this energy, this mass, this whole identity, this GPM, whatever, you get rid of all that. And then what's left is the being. And whatever he wants to have in his own universe, however he wants to mock it up. That's really what OT is. And also what's left is uniquely you. Like Laurie says, Scientology is not a cookie cutter operation. You meet a bunch of players and they're all quite different from each other. All have different life experiences, different goals. You're not trying to create some sort of identical. You got no. When you're auditing people, the thing about auditing people is what you're doing is you're kind of freeing them up. Well, if you don't think that beings are basically good, you're really not going to be very willing to free them up. And all religions fall into one of two categories. Either they think that the beings are basically bad, and they have to be controlled in order to be good, or they're basically good and there's things that are influencing them to be bad. So if you believe that, then you're willing to reduce those influences and let the person you give the person freedom. If you think that person's going to use freedom to create havoc, you're not going to do it. But if you have confidence that if you free somebody up, he's going to, operate on a higher ethical level, you have no problem doing it. And that's one of the big differences between Scientology and other religions. And but even in Scientology, it tends to creep in that people have to be really well controlled, or else they'll just go amok. You see that in these
Church.
In the church, these heavily controlled groups. And so, the final thing really is once you've got yourself in a good condition, how do you keep it that way? You have to exercise the abilities that you get in the grades. You don't really think of it this way, but you have an ability to communicate. So there's a discipline of communicating rather than not communicating. You have the ability to not have problems, or not make something into a problem. So you see people who make things into problems all the time. They don't have to be problems, they just do it. So you have to have the discipline of not creating problems. You have the discipline of not responding in kind when you're somebody's in theta to you or about you, and the grade OW, grade 2. You can get exterior from it. You don't have to respond in kind. That's an ability. You have the ability to not ARC break. Like Larry says, all stimulation is self-determined. But again, the more space you have in your universe and the more open things are for you, the more you see that you have a choice to whether to go with it or not, whether indulge in your in your charge or not. And the ability to not ARC brake is a high-level ability, in grade 4, the ability to kind of see some validity in both sides of an issue. It's a pan-determined viewpoint rather than latching onto a fixed idea and opposing some other fixed idea. So these are all important abilities, and ability to tolerate different viewpoints, the ability to tolerate different beingnesses, and like the definition of sanity, it's like a tolerance of confusion and an agreed upon stable datum on which to handle the confusion. So if you can't tolerate what's going on, you're not going to be sane in your responses to it. So if you can tolerate what's going on, you can rationally, whatever the ball is, you can move it in the right direction a little bit anyway. And also, a very important ability that develops along the way is to differentiate between instinct and impulse. Now, impulse is reactive, instinct is knowingness, generally. And again, the more space you have, the more ability you have to distinguish between what is something that you know and what is just a reaction that you feel like you have to do. Because an impulse is compulsive, and it occurs in no space. When people get very angry, they get no space. And actually, they can't, we say blind, angry, blind, the vision goes out. You run people who've had severe anger reaction engrams, and they don't see the environment at all anymore. It's just a total stimulus response thing. So you have to be able to operate in your knowingness and stay exterior to your impulses. That's an ability you develop and helps you maintain the clarity of your own universe. When you run into a problem, you solve the problem by getting bigger than the problem. Another ability. Studying policy is really important too. It's interesting, the difference between red and white and green and white. Red and white, already says, hey, you're a Thetan, you can do it, you can make things go right, nothing's impossible. And in green and white, he says, well, yeah, but you better have a plan, you gotta have some policy, you better have some resources, and, let's apply some common sense to this. So, people that are successful in life usually, are trained, and they're good managers. They're good managers of their own universe. They're good managers of the environment. So it's important to get some good understanding of management tech as well. So that's most people want to you want to go OT, but most people want to be successful in life. It's like what Roland was saying earlier. That's really the button is how can I be more successful in life? Well, that's knowing what you're doing, and also having increased tolerance and increased theta and increased willingness and ability to communicate and have ARC and all those things that you gain by doing the bridge. And then you can use what you know to create an environment around yourself that is above high-tone environment, has uptone people in it, and that tends to stabilize your own ability to be uptone. You're not constantly being, picked at in a low-toned environment. You can't stay high-toned in a low-toned environment. It's very difficult. So anyway, it's all of these are all the things you can accomplish by getting sufficient auditing to bring this about. And the net result of that, it makes life better for you, but it also makes life better for all of us. So please, it's an important thing to do, and I just hope everybody continues and persists in doing their own bridge and helping others do the same. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Trey.